that's where we actually jumped off with homeschooling.
There's a little bit of a story there.
Okay.
We did enroll her in first grade in our public school, just like you when you were in first grade. And she had almost the same conversation with us the first week of school.
Welcome to the Homeschool Journal, a show that unpacks the joys and journeys of the classical homeschool family. Here's your host, Carrie McGraw.
Hi friends, we want to bring to you today another great episode of the Homeschool Journal. It is my hope and prayer that this podcast is encouraging, uplifting, and allows you to journey alongside of other homeschoolers. And we're going to do that today with a very unique and busy couple out of California. This homeschool couple not only chose to homeschool for their family, but they chose to open up homeschool opportunities for many other families as well. If you're enjoying our podcast, give us a thumbs up and leave us a comment. Let's meet Staci and Doug and listen to how their homeschool team makes it all work. Doug and Staci, hi, how are you today?
Great. We're happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So happy to have you. Excited that you are going to spend today with us sharing your heart, your home, your homeschooling journey with all of our listeners out there in beautiful, beautiful California. Now, where I know that you all are, let's see, Doug, you're an avid backpacker. Is that right?
Yes, I certainly am.
In the mountains of beautiful California. And I understand that, Staci, you enjoy hiking as well.
Yes, I developed the hobby of hiking to better accompany my husband through the adventures of life.
She's been very supportive. I grew up in Oregon, and I was a little biased thinking that there was no place else to backpack in the world. And then I discovered Southern California actually has quite a bit of great backpacking. So I stand for it.
How wonderful. Well, if you ever get a chance to head out here to the Midwest, I don't know that we have the greatest, backpacking that you all do, but we do have caves and horses. So come on out here. But, I want to share with our listeners that Doug and Staci have been married for almost 20 years. They're coming upon that anniversary, and they have 5 children, and their oldest is already out here in the Midwest studying voice at my alma mater. You all did not know that, did you?
Wow.
Yeah, Indiana University. So hi, neighbor. And then they have 4 more, at home with them ages 8 to 15. And we're just really excited that you all are here with us today and are going to tell your story. So I don't want to start at the beginning, like if you're a Sound of Music fan like I am, it says you start at the beginning and do, re, mi, but we're going to start kind of right in the middle of your journey. I would really like to know and talk with our listeners about where you are in your homeschool journey right now.
Okay. Right now we have children from 8 to 15 at home. So we've got some in grammar school level and some in upper school level. And we've been really going in depth with the Memoria Press curriculum for about 9 years, I think. And my story probably starts like a lot of other listeners' story. We actually had lived briefly in the Midwest in Minneapolis. And as we were making our way back out to California, I was prayerfully searching for something different. And I hadn't loved the classical pieces of curriculum that I had used in my homeschooling journey thus far. And but I knew I had this kind of impression that there must have been something in the past that was efficacious in education. There had to be a missing piece that we somehow let go of as a culture. And that must have been an inspired thought. So I started to think, what can I look back to? What's something solid? And I just had this idea to search for Latin. I had no Latin background, no interest in Latin outside of that thought. And as I started to search, I came upon a curriculum that no one in my circle had ever mentioned to me, which was Memoria Press. And I did what homeschool moms do, where they put, all the potential curriculum pieces with their limited budget for that school year in a basket, and then you think about it for a long time.
Yes,
and
right.
So I put it all in the basket, and then I was looking at another provider as well, and I put all of that in the basket, and I prayed over it for a few weeks and thought about it and tried to read articles on the different websites and the different forums that we, how we love to over research everything. And then one evening, as I sat looking at my laptop, I looked at the Memoria Press site again, and I saw the tagline, "Saving Western Civilization One Student at a Time."
Yes, and that will
I'm
grab
not
you.
sure I fully grasp what they're getting at, but that's a really bold assertion. I'm going to spend my money with them this year. I'm going to go for it. So I pressed, purchase, and waited for, as this is while we're making.
This is while you're still in Minneapolis.
I think we were, we were on our way back, actually. I think we're at my parents' home in Arizona, but we were traveling back to California, and I placed my order, and, we settle into our new little home here, and we're waiting for this book order. And I'd done many book days before and had always been mildly disappointed. Not terribly disappointed, but just a little bit of a sigh when I would look over the materials and think, okay, well, this should be good. We can make this work. And one day the boxes arrived to my house, and I was alone, and I opened up. The first thing on the top was First Form Latin. I pulled the workbook and the textbook out and looked through it, and just instantaneously knew that this was different, that this was a different whole approach, a different type of curriculum. I knew it would provide a challenge to then my 5th grade daughter, who's now away at college. And I just saw the logical progression, the systemic approach, and the simplicity of the materials as being very accessible. Now, I still was afraid that she would call me out as not knowing what I was doing when it came to Latin, because I didn't know what I was doing. And I had this little fear that within a couple of days, she would just look at me and say, "Mom, you don't know Latin," and neither do I. But it went just the other way. In about 3 days, she and I looked at each other and we said, we found the missing piece of language arts study. And it was something that I really, truly had been looking for throughout my own K-12 education, I think. It was a long sought answer. I just knew something was missing from how I was taught, particularly in the language arts, but all the way across.
Staci, I absolutely love what you said about, you knew that there was something to reach back to, that there had to be something more. That is so much a part of my story and other stories that I hear when, we knew that there had to be something that was going to pull our families forward into a more beautiful and God-fulfilling education. And then the fact that you're so right about, I love our motto, saving Western civilization one student at a time. And I often say it's really, for us, it turned out to be one family at a time. And so I love the story of your research. My goodness, going across country while you're ordering. And yes, when you said, how we research and we leave all these things in different buckets until we pull the punches and we actually hit pay, I often have like 19 tabs open on my computer, and I swear to Pete, only 3 of them are working. So,
yes.
So let's talk about how you all are making this work right now. I mean, you're a very busy family. There's many things going on. What our listeners don't know about Staci and Doug is that they operate, or Staci primarily is the homeschooler for the home, but Staci operates 3 Highlands Latin School cottage schools. So this is amazing. And Doug is there right beside her, making all of this possible for the family. So let's talk about that and how you guys work together. Talk about a week, a day in the life of the Heder family. I love the practical.
Sure. Well, I guess I should start here since Staci got the last word in. How do we make it work? That's a little bit of a subjective question, right? Because that assumes we are making it work.
Oh, funny.
I think it's a process like so many things. I mean, you learn something new every day, and you're constantly trying to fiddle and improve the system and the process, right? And so, today where we're at looks definitely different where we started, on this journey, however many years ago it's been now. And gosh, so much has changed just in this last year alone that has had an immediate and material impact on how we do things every day
Yes.
with our family.
And Doug, that's changed for many families. So by all means, share where you were, where you are, and because a lot of families need to hear, what's going on out there. We've been isolated.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've spent the better part of my career working in some aspect of the entertainment industry. I came out, I spent almost 10 years working on the film and television side in Southern California. And the last 15 years have been spent on interactive entertainment, which, to put into normal everyday terms means I make video games for a living. And,
you're a popular guy.
So, depending on who you ask,
okay.
yes.
Okay, with anyone that's under 17, right? Anyone?
Right. Yeah, the parents at the school sometimes give me a little bit of a raised eyebrow look, but no. So entertainment is definitely a how do I put this? It's not a 9-to-5 job. There's periods, there's highs and lows. There's moments where you're just crazy and crunching and the hours are all over the place and my family doesn't see me for weeks and months at a time. I mean, they see me, but you know what I mean? Like very, very, the window's very, very small in the day. And then there's periods where we're kind of on a downswing and things are a little bit slower and I have a little bit more time to travel with the kids or to be at home and be more involved. So that's always been the case to some degree or another. And where we're at now, which is great because that gives us some flexibility. And I think it's also helped me to kind of think a little bit outside the box in terms of how we approach things day to day in our life. And of course, now with, for the past year, especially here in Southern California, I don't know what it's like for you all in Kentucky and other parts of the Midwest, is we've been under pretty tight lockdown. And as of March, I have not been in my office, the actual work office since March. So I'm coming up on a year now.
Wow.
And while there's certainly downsides to that and other topics, which I won't go into on this conversation, what it has afforded me is even more flexibility. And, I am enjoying tutoring my son in math right now, for example. And I've even used some of the downtime where I would normally been commuting to the office back and forth. I was trying to catch up on my own Latin studies and math studies and doing what I can to keep up with what the family's doing. And that to me has always been really important, is that this isn't just mom teaching the kids, but it's really a family cultural shift for us. And so I'm learning as I go as much as anybody, as much as the kids are. I feel like I've benefited so much from this journey. And it, just like Staci said, it has filled in so many pieces for me that instinctively I knew were kind of missing. I think my parents had an instinct for, but didn't necessarily have the label or the language for describing what it was that they were trying to do as parents.
Right.
And that's what Memoria Press and Classical Studies has provided us as a family, is more of a language for how to describe what it is we're doing and more of a philosophy. And it's more of a conscious choice now and a deliberate choice on our parts. And I really appreciate that.
Doug, I absolutely love what you said about a cultural shift. Those are words I've never used before for this transition into homeschooling and what happens for the family and for the home as you discover the beauty of homeschooling. Now, we all know, as you said a minute ago, there's some challenges and we're still learning and we learn as we go. But that cultural shift is a beautiful way to put that, because Let's talk about, though, you guys had a bit of a bigger shift than some families, because not only did you take on homeschooling for your kiddos, you opened up those opportunities for others as well. So Staci, talk to me about, what it is, where you all took homeschooling.
Well, I have to go back to when I was in first grade, to be honest.
Woo!
So
now that's going back to the beginning.
Well, when I was in first grade, this is really a part of the story. I mean it humorously, but truly, I enjoyed kindergarten quite a bit. My dad was in the Air Force, and we moved to four different bases during kindergarten. So I just had a fun time meeting all these kids and having a little formal schooling. And when I got into first grade, we lived in North Carolina, and I was ready for the meat of education. I mean, I knew how to read, I knew how to add and subtract, and I was ready to dive in. And I wasn't in this, I had a lovely teacher, Mrs. Henry, and I wasn't in that class very long before it was recess. And I went outside and looked at the sky and thought, where's the meat? When will they start teaching us? Why do they have all the kids together, but they're not really teaching us anything? And I really was thinking about this in first grade. And the reason why I bring that up is because this question haunted me throughout my own education. I love to read. I love to learn. And every year my teachers promised me that the next year would be the year that the information and the content would become rich and meaningful and challenging. And every year they said it'd be the next year. And I have to say I developed a little bit of a cynicism toward schooling in general, because I just didn't see that coming to fruition. And so when I had this discovery, so of course I was able to put that kind of all away for a time once I was out of school. But once you have your first child, you know, you're called back to really look at those questions again.
Right.
And we had a really rare opportunity for Olivia who's our eldest, to attend this very tiny private preschool program that was really special and wonderful. And they spent a great amount of time in nature, which was exceptional. At the time we lived in the city in West LA. And it was a really wonderful experience for her. And after that, even though we lived in a school district that was considered a very top-rated district here in Los Angeles, I just knew where she was at academically probably wouldn't fit in great with what they would be doing. And that's where we actually jumped off with homeschooling.
There's a little bit of a story there.
Okay.
We did enroll her in first grade in our public school, just like you when you were in first grade. And she had almost the same conversation with us the first week of school.
I mean, she had a really enriching kindergarten and junior kindergarten experience. And so when she got to first grade, she said, we just sit on the rug all day, Mom. I don't know what's happening. So I had her there for about 3 days. And at that point, I was a reluctant homeschooler. I like to join and be a part of things. Like, I don't want to be off on my own. And so I started to dip my toe into that world, which is a very eclectic world out in West Los Angeles. There's a wide variety of approaches, not a tremendously large classical education representation there. And so our journey started with her in first grade. I had several little ones, and just starting to learn, like my husband said, learn the vocabulary that you learn when you're trying to make those choices for your family. And all of that was new to me. So we had several years there where we tried many different curricula, many different approaches, and
went back into school, went back out of school.
We tried a German version charter school for a time, and after
when we started homeschooling Olivia in first grade, I don't think either of us were thinking this was a long-term plan. It was more of like, well, she's kind of wasting her time there, so we're not going to really. What are you really going to miss out pausing first grade? I think we were both of the same mindset.
Well, that's so true. I mean, that is something that so many homeschoolers find, myself included. I had one that I brought home, or I started at home. I sent to school a little bit, brought her back home. So that's a journey that rings true for so many of our homeschoolers. And then so many of us do it kind of kicking and screaming sometimes, pulled into homeschooling. But Staci, you just said that you like to join in. Well, but you created something that others could join into.
Well, so that's the whole thing. All of this search, from the story I told you from myself being in first grade all the way through Olivia being in first grade, and then the years that followed where we tried many different educational options in our community, at home. We spent several years homeschooling with different curricula. I was just always searching. I felt that there had to be a canonized complete education, and yet no one had the answer. And so for me, I'm emphasizing all of this backstory because when I picked up the Memoria Press materials and recognized that through the work of Cheryl Lowe, God had provided me the answer I sought my entire life, I was not a little bit excited. I was not, we'll see where this goes. I was on fire.
Right.
And I just started to evangelize without ceasing. I mean, it was ridiculous. Like, I'm sure I was a very annoying person to be around for that period. I had my little group of ladies from church where we'd go to the park once a week, and all the moms would say, well, I don't know. I just don't know if we're doing enough science. Do you think this is enough science? And then they would say, well, I just am worried about this. And everyone liked to, bear their anxieties. And I said, ladies, you don't need to worry anymore. I found the answer. I found the answer. And there was a dear friend there that I probably annoyed more than most of the ladies. And she was not, I wouldn't say from the outset, as a parent, that I was particularly classically minded. This was a revelation for me. And this other mother was also not, even looking in that realm. It was hard to, it was where you're really approaching why study Latin and those basic discussions.
Mm-hmm.
And because I had an older student, a 5th grade student, who dove right in with the forms, I saw within months the connections she was making between, English grammar and Latin grammar. And I saw that her understanding 3 months into first form was deeper than my own understanding of English grammar.
Yes.
I saw these fruits immediately, and they were so powerful. And then, of course, the more I tried, we started, I think, Storytime Treasures with my 1st grader, and First Start Reading, and all the different pieces, everything I tried, it all measured up to the standard of excellence that I'd never seen before. So I'm sharing this with whoever will listen to me. I'm sure that I tend to be pretty passionate, and I'm told I could sell snow to an Eskimo or whatever. So I'm sure I was really on fire about this, even to a point that would seem odd to me myself now looking back. But it was a lifelong quest that I had been blessed to find the answer to. And so I sat down with this same mother. Her name is actually Jenny Vance, and many people at Memoria Press know her. I sat down with her. I said, we're going to start. I asked her to meet me for, cocoa one night at the Coffee Bean. And I said, we're going to start a program. We're going to have like a little co-op. And she just kind of looks at me and she's like, okay. I said, I'm going to teach Latin and classical studies and grammar and literature, and you're going to teach the younger kids. And she said, okay. And that's what we did. We rented some classrooms, and we started, I think, in the fall of 2014. So just a little over a year after we had really, gone all in with Memoria Press at home. We started with 2 classrooms, grades 1 through 5. So we had a 1st, 2nd grade class and a 3rd through 5th grade class. 2 teachers, completely volunteer basis. Basically asked for almost zero contribution from the families financially, because I thought, we're untested. This could go awry, so we're just going to try. And part of my impetus for wanting to do that was that many people, when I explained this amazing journey we were having with Memoria Press, would say, well, your kids are just extra smart, or there's, most kids are not going to like studying that way. It's dry, it's boring. There's something different about your family. And I thought, well, what if they're right? What if my kids are weird? And I didn't think my kids were weird, but maybe they were. So I thought I needed a bigger pool to experiment on. And that was pretty much my motivation. So I gathered these, few, maybe it was 5 or 6 families, and the fruit of that, even that one small year in 2 classrooms, was so profound that we had doubled in size by the end of the year, and then, almost doubled again by the end of the next year. So it was, everybody who came loved it, and everybody who partook didn't want to leave. And it was just a beautiful experience.
Staci, what you just said to me was absolutely perfect, because I want our listeners to hear how this simple step for you, and it all started over a cup of hot cocoa, is what you said. And yeah. Right. And so there's 2 messages that I want our families out there to hear from the Heder family. And the first is this message of team, the fact that, Doug recognizes that they're growing all the time. We adjust all the time. All of us in the last year have adjusted to things that we never thought we would have to. And yet they work together. But the second message I want everyone to hear from them is about connections, and how Staci created these connections, not just for their family, but for many other families, and how that simple cup of hot cocoa has launched itself over, I think, the last 7 years into 3 cottage schools out in California. Am I right? 3, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And so I would encourage all of our homeschoolers out there, make those connections, have that cup of hot cocoa and discuss those things you thought you'd never discuss. But let's turn back to their story. And because it has more messages to share, I really want to talk about how you all keep it together as a family. So tell me about the heart of your home, the important things that are your family's way of identifying as homeschoolers, and how you make it all keep going.
Sure. Well, I'll start here. You said a couple things in your message, Carrie, that struck true with me. One is adaptability, and I want to talk about that first. I think for us, so by nature of the two of us, I would say I'm the more rigid person in the relationship, and by nature, I want things to be kind of organized and orderly, and I want to have things to be predictable. But that's where I think the strength of our relationship comes through. I also recognize that is just a human tendency of me, and that is not an eternal principle, right? Like that's just, okay, I recognize that that's just a personality trait, and it's not necessarily a truth, right? Or a truism. And I think that's been a big, big part of our journey for me. I mean, why we even got into homeschooling to begin with, and then later on the cottage schools, for me was sort of being just open to those possibilities. And, there's a lot of, and that's a constant thing, right? Like my nature is going to always drive me towards, well, that more orderly, rigid version. But, I'm kind of always pulled back into that more. I'm humbled daily in my relationship with Staci. And I appreciate that because I learned so much from her, and I'm just so grateful that we have such a good counterbalance with each other in that sense, because it helps me to grow in that way. So that being able to at least recognize that we need to be adaptable is, I think, a first part of that. The second piece for me then, of course, goes back to, well, what is it that you're focused on? And are we both focused on the same thing? And I mean, that for me is the cornerstone. I mean, ultimately, none of this would work if we didn't have a singular focus to the most important thing, which is our faith in Jesus Christ and our faith in his gospel. And, that the day for us starts there, 100%, I talked about, is it ever perfect? Is the process ever done? No, it's not. We're always trying to improve how we progress the culture in our own home. And for us, how do we make it work? How do we keep it all together? Right now, that looks like, working from home has given me the flexibility to have more focused family time with the family. And, part of our important routine, and this has gone between, whether it's in the morning, first thing, or kind of the last thing, touch point of the day, making sure we have that devotional daily, as a family praying together and reading from the scriptures together.
Wonderful.
And in addition to that, where Memoria Press has enriched us, is that we also make part of that devotional reading from a good book together, or discussing some of the principles and ideas that the kids have studied that day, whether in school or at home as part of their homeschooling process. So those three things are really key for us in sort of making things work. I guess if you can say we're making it work. What would you say, dear?
I think we are, and I've noticed an increase in peace in the home. So some of the things when I've talked to more prospective homeschoolers in the last year since the lockdown than I ever have before. People that are just beginning to open to the possibility, and they all have the same concerns. It's like, how will I make sure they're getting enough socialization? How will I make sure they're not on screen too much? How will I make sure they actually learn and listen to me, when I'm the primary teacher? And I have a firm testimony that as we teach by precept and example, that we put God and his kingdom first, that increases the spirit of peace and love in our home, obviously
Amen.
Through the Holy Spirit. We see that every day. So we have conflict like every family, and we have, faults like every family, but I truly see that moment of the softening of the heart. Of course, as parents, we know our kids need to see us humble ourselves and ask for forgiveness from one another. And from them at times, they need to see us, on our knees praying. But I do find that family devotional really I've always prioritized that as the start of the day, because I truly thought we needed the Lord's help to get through our day.
That's right. That's right. And
Um,
I often say that there's a heavenly simplicity that is brought when you are honoring God as the primary teachers of your children. Now, oftentimes that means that, you are enrolled in a cottage school, you are, or maybe for many you're at public schools. But if parents will remember to claim themselves as the primary teachers of their children, and then that next step in homeschooling, there's just this heavenly presence that comes into your home when you do that, as you all say, to honor God. And so it really focuses the family. It builds a stronger family. That's what we found. And all these worldly things just seem to fall away. The sibling rivalry, we had very little of it because everyone was participating and moving in the same direction and concerned about each other to make sure that the day, the week, the year was a success. And Staci, you're so right, because this whole experience that the world has gone through, I'm talking to more and more people that never thought that they would be here, that like I said earlier, might have gone kicking and screaming, but they are now more interiorly focused on the values of the family. And I think that is a blessing I look forward to seeing unfold in our country. So every once in a while, we do need to acknowledge that there are families out there that don't have the blessing of the team like you all have. That there are those that are doing this maybe by themselves, whether they're doing it because their spouse, just isn't on board. Doug, like you said, I am much like you. I am more rigid. Things had better be orderly. My children may refer to me as a drill sergeant, but or that they don't have a spouse and they're doing this. Is there any encouragement that you can give to these families concerning this journey of homeschooling?
So when I was starting the cottage schools, I often got into conversations with my friends' husbands. So they say never work with your friends. And of course, my business now is entirely founded on my friends. And so I would often, I would say, in my wide circle, there were husbands that were in all different places as far as their readiness or willingness to participate or even think much about it. And I've watched those journeys that those families have been on. So speaking to just having a husband that maybe at this time doesn't fully grasp the grandeur of classical education or the purpose of keeping the kids learning in the home, or really just pursuing an alternative educational path outside of the government schools. I feel like it's a lot like everything in marriage. I think that I don't know, someone told me once that if you want your family to be happy doing chores together, then be happy while you're doing chores and don't be grouchy while you're doing it, and engaged and get moving, and then let people see that this is not the worst thing ever. And I've seen women, close friends of mine, move ahead. And I think throughout the last, decade, I've seen the fruits that are very unique to this approach of education really be marvelous in their homes, and their husbands have over time become very grateful for that kind of pioneering effort. I realize that, my mom was a single mom, and I realized that not everyone, is going to have the opportunity to necessarily do this. But I guess what I would say to someone who is on their own and is wondering how they can find the time or resources for whatever reason, I will attest and testify that God will provide. He will provide what you need to educate your children in a way that is pleasing to him. And he has done that for us. This was never something that was started out of, a rich, we have a bunch of money set aside, so we want to start a business, and what should we do?
Right. This
was something, and I think that was the funny thing about starting the cottage school, was suddenly I was a business owner and I didn't even really grasp it. But I've seen God provide all that we've needed, and he continues to do that. And so if you're a single mom, or you're struggling, or your husband's not on board, go to him in prayer and receive, his grace. And I know that our journeys are going to look different, obviously, at different times too.
That's right.
We're not going to all be doing the exact same thing.
Yes. Staci and Doug, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us today, for sharing how on a daily, weekly, yearly basis, and in the midst of a time that no one, could have predicted how the world would have affected our families, how you all make it work and how you continue to work together. And I also wanted our listeners to hear, Staci's final words are, the Lord will provide. Step forward in faith and in trust, and choose that which is the good, the true, and the beautiful for your homes at all times, and trust. Thank you for joining us today, Staci and Doug. I pray that this day and this moment together has brought you great blessings as well.
You're so welcome. Carrie. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a lot of fun.
God bless to you both, and God bless to everyone today. Thanks for being with us on the Homeschool Journal. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you liked our episode, click the thumbs up button or leave a comment below and let us know what you thought. Click the bell icon or subscribe to stay in the loop and get notifications of when we have new episodes. You can also check out our other resources and videos on classical homeschool education. I'm Carrie McGraw. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.